Good afternoon. I have my latest guest on the Simply Sell podcast. This is going to be John Ferguson from Aslan. John, welcome to the Simply Sell podcast on how to be persuasive in sales. So thank you for hopping on today.
Thank you for having me. Love the topic, how to be persuasive in sales. Okay.
Absolutely. It's most people are like, well, salesmen have to be persuasive, but I think you might be able to give us some insights that, maybe you don't naturally have to be persuasive, but you have to be strategic in the way that you do it. So I'm sure you're going to be able to give us that
Yeah.
insight. So, but before we start talking about that, let's talk about your background. Because when I researched you,
Mhm.
you've been a CEO, a COO, and senior VP of sales, and right now you work with companies to help improve their sales teams. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, that's right. I've been doing what I do now for about the last 10 years, and I absolutely love it. So the experience that I drew on when I got into the business of working with salespeople and helping them be persuasive and be strategic and basically how to communicate in a way that makes what you do different and makes a difference is I kind of lean into the background that I had prior to doing this. So my career has always been in sales. Right out of undergraduate school, I started with Coca-Cola, went on to work with Gatorade at Quaker Oats, worked a little bit in consumer technology, some industrial textile businesses, and then I spent nearly almost 10 years running sales for Getty Images. And that's where I came across Aslan, who I work with today and represent, Aslan Sales Training and Development. I hired them to work with my team there. And then I went on to run a small competitor of Getty Images as CEO. And from there, how does the commercial go? You liked what you found so much at one of your stops along the way. You came back there to work at them. And that was me with Aslan. So that's how I arrived, and that's how I got here, and that's the experience that I drew on and use as I've kind of charted my way over the last 10 years.
Great story. I like hearing that. So now what's interesting about you is you actually practice what you preach. So you're still out there closing business for Aslan and then teaching that curriculum to the client. So give us
Yeah.
some insight on that because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, you have a very good perception of that, and that is exactly what it is. You know, it's interesting when I work with team members, when I work in sales and I work in the sales space, what I get to say to almost everybody in that room is that I have been in your seat, not as a practitioner of doing it in other companies throughout my career. That, of course, is true. But what I tell them, I wouldn't be here today working and facilitating with you unless, in fact, I had engaged with your company and convinced them to work with me, or they thought it was a good idea for me to work with them. So I still have to develop a pipeline. I have to do good discovery. I have to make presentations, and then I get to go to work with great companies. So that is absolutely right. I have to practice what I preach. Otherwise, I don't have clients to deliver to, which is a little different than traditional sales training is. And I love it because it keeps me sharp. It gives me relevance and credibility. And to be honest, I know of no better way to keep my pipeline full, move things through the process, and get them closed than to follow exactly what we outlined in the sales workshop.
So if I'm listening to you correctly, you're a visionary and an integrator because you're a visionary in selling the program. You're an integrator because you're integrating the program, but then you're a visionary again by teaching them. So I don't think I've ever heard that. There's either a visionary or an integrator, but you're kind of a combination of both.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, I like that word visionary because it all starts with a conversation with the customer. What's your vision? Where do you want to go? Where are you today? And can we help you get there? But you have to have that same conversation within the players that are in the room, which is invariably the sales team. Where is it you'd like to go individually and collectively? Obviously, we know where the company wants to go. Where are your strengths? Where are your areas for improvements? And where can I help? So yeah, it is absolutely both that. And one other thing I would add to that I love about doing it this way, and I tell this to clients, is that I get it, my learning starts with the first phone call. So whether or not we work together, that's one thing. But as soon as we start engaging early on, hey, I noticed you reached our website, or I reached out to you, or this was a referral, or you heard about me somehow, everything you start to say, I start to internalize. So I bring that back to the workshops when I go there, because traditional sales training is not good or bad. I'm just giving you the contrast. Is somebody sold it and then somebody delivers it, right?
Mm.
And there's that difference. So the person who learned about me on the sales side actually get to implement it on during the workshop side. And sometimes there's not a match there. With me, there is, because I would sell it, I do sell it, and then I deliver it, and then we follow up with it and stick with it. So yeah, all three of those areas I'm there.
That's a huge differentiator. So I was a part of your sales training program a number of years ago,
Uh,
which was awesome. And there were a few things that resonated from my learning experience. One was a term you created. You came right out of the gate, and that term was the me monster. So tell the audience a little bit about that. I love the term. So tell us what your version of the me monster is.
Yeah, that's first of all, a great question. And to answer that, you could take a step back. Where I start with workshops is not step one of a sales process. Here's what you say, here's what you do if you hear. We take a step back and we say, is your audience, in this case, your customer, even willing and receptive to listen to you? And the reason we say that is that their willingness to listen is far more important than anything you would have to say. So it's whether it's your value prop or your price or your product or your features, if they're not willing to listen, all of that doesn't matter. So in order to do that, we say, how do you drive receptivity even with new customers, even early in the process? And the two things that we found that you want to either focus on or avoid is you make the customer, your audience, the priority, and you relieve tension, stress, fear, anxiety, which is pressure, right? So the me monster refers to the priority piece. When it's more about you than it is about them, that is a form of being a me monster, or that's the correlation that we like to make. If you're talking more about what you do, what your products do, the years you've been in business, this very logical, convincing, or trying to be convincing reason early on, you should be interested in what I have to say or do, you're consuming the energy, you're consuming the oxygen like a me monster. No different than if you were to go to a party and you were to tell a story and somebody wants to one up or two up your story. We've all been there. It's exhausting. And then what do? We shut down, we go away, we turn our back, we talk to somebody else. Honestly, that's what customers do if we show up and be that same thing. So we say, avoid it. We show a video clip from Brian Regan who describes it. It's very funny because we've all seen it. And I have to be honest with you, Brian, I go all the way back to my first, second workshop and I go, what do you still remember? What do you like the most? They go, John, loved it, but I love that Me Monster video because I always think about it. If I overtalk, I don't want to do it. So we don't want to default to ourselves. That's something that's easy to do. We want it to be about our audience. And so therefore we say avoid being the Me Monster.
Awesome. Well, great. I love that. So one of the most important things a salesperson can do is to get the trust of the client. How do you do that with a potential new client who has never done business with you? So you're coming in cold. How do you earn their trust right out of the gate?
Yeah, a great question. A little connection to what we were just talking about. But here's what I'd like to say and or set it up this way, and I do it with the teams I work with, is that in sales, as salespeople, we are guilty until proven innocent. It is, oh my gosh, here comes a salesperson, whether that's by phone, by email, you got through the front door, side door, back door, however you got there. You're in sales and my guard needs to come up. And the reason is most that do what we do struggle with it. They lead with the solution. They talk more about themselves. They get product info. They don't listen enough. And the list could go on and on and on. So the way that you gain trust early, high level, you're opposite of that. How are you opposite of that? You really lean in and you let them know you're going to be the priority, not me. This isn't my agenda, my time. It's 9:30. I'll start talking at 9:31. It's not that. What is it that you'd like to learn today? And you relieve or you take away or you alleviate tension, fear, and stress from the conversation, which we call pressure. Because we've talked to a lot of customers and we said, why are salespeople guilty until proven innocent? Why do you in purchasing? Why do you as a B2B buyer? Why do you as a consumer buyer? Why do you as a buyer of product and services avoid sales call, ghost people, don't connect on LinkedIn, use caller ID and all the things that they do? And they say it's for those two reasons. It's never about me. It's more about them. And I always feel like there's some stress or tension brought to the meeting. And of course I say, tension to buy? No, just to think different, do different, consider something different. So if you alleviate that up front, it makes it far easier for them to listen and pay attention and to agree to some next steps, which is really the art of selling. What do we want to do next?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So now you have an other-centered sales approach, which you teach to your clients, which is, by the way, really good. What type of mindset should a salesperson have with this type of approach?
Yeah, that you have more to learn than you have more to say. I think
Okay.
is what I would call the overreaching or the theme that runs through it. You know, we're a capabilities company that's focused on 4, maybe 5, if you include receptivity in the middle, which is what we've been talking about early on here. But if you were to look at it as a circle, if you were to start with a good receptive, open client, meaning I'm willing to listen, doesn't mean I'm going to buy, but listen, I am willing to listen and go through a process. Then you move through engage and then into discover. I want to ask some good questions and learn the dots that you want to achieve or avoid. I want to make sure I connect those dots in my presentation so I can say, because you, since you. And then, of course, I want to be helpful that we get this across the finish line. The reason that we put receptivity in the middle of all that is that receptivity helps with all of that. In other words, being other centered, I have more to learn than I have to say along the way is helpful, and it is other centered. The only place you want to come up with, here's what I have to say, is in the form of a recommendation after you've gone through the other steps. And that big step, of course, is discover and taking the trip and understanding their perspective. They now feel this is different. They feel like they can trust you, your earlier question. And it is other centered because most of us in sales are self centered. Why? It's tied to our compensation. I need to convince you to buy from me so I get paid. And that's what customers are most guarded about.
Great. So when we think of being persuasive, we naturally think of talking someone into something. So I think with your other centered approach, it's different. So tell the audience a little bit about that type of approach as you're trying to be persuasive.
Yeah, this is great because this is the way I also like to frame that up. I meet a lot of people doing what I'm doing, connected to those that I have in workshops or even in businesses that I work with, who I say to them, you'd be great at sales. And of course, their hand comes up and goes, oh, not me, not me. I don't want to be that convincing. I don't want to have to schmooze. I don't want to have to. They have all kinds of words for what their interpretation of sales is, selling the extra and doing all that. And what I say is, no, you're very good at asking questions and listening and processing. And that is the art of sales, right? So
Mm.
we very deliberately called the section of our workshop, which is really a presentation, we call it build value because we talk about it as a recommendation, not a pitch. Yes, there's elements of a presentation and it ultimately is, but presentation makes you think of presentation. I've got to be convincing. And we do. I want to make sure that I separate myself from others, and we have to. But when it comes out in a form of a recommendation, that's the true art of selling. So when you get there, if I were to say, Brian, because you or since you, here's what I believe we should do, it's easier for you to say yes or consider the next step. If it's features and benefit, and I go, here's a feature, here's a benefit, isn't that great? Even if you shake your head, there's really no relevance on what that means for your business. And the last one thing I'll add to that is the only way I can say because you or since you is if I ask the questions well and do effective listening and make sure I have those dots to connect there. I've convinced some people who thought they'd never be good at sales to get in sales by telling them that story because I said, it's not about smoozing. You don't have to go to the bar and do all this and talk to them and take them out to all night. They want you to, by the way, most customers want you to be their good partner rather than they want you to be their good friend anyway, because they're trying to run a business, can focus on that. So yeah, that's what it's about. Listening, you have more to learn than you have to say. That helps you be other centered.
It's funny you say that with the schmoozing thing. The industry's changing in my opinion. I think the entertainment piece and even the travel piece I think has changed quite a bit. There's more virtual calls now.
Mhm.
People are so busy and they're understaffed and overworked that they just don't have the time to, from professional standpoint to a personal standpoint to do all of that. And I think that seems to be misunderstood in a lot of different industries that you got to go and you got to schmooze them and do this and do that. I think that's becoming obsolete in a lot of areas, not everywhere, but a lot of areas. And I think the things that you're talking about, how can you make me better at my job? How can
Mhm.
you help drive value to my company? That is what I think people are looking for these days with as many things that are coming at them. So great points on that. Very much.
An interesting
I agree.
carryover from that, Brian, you are absolutely right, is from COVID. So what we learned at
Mhm.
COVID, formulating really good virtual techniques and finding customers who were admittedly and thankfully adapting to using virtual tools, because as you just mentioned, it's still with us today, and that's great. But I remember several customers, if you want to multiply it, said this, we used to see 4, 5, or 6 different companies or different people from different companies that could help us or wanted to sell us or wanted to partner with us. We don't have time. When we're doing virtual calls, we got room for 2. So we're going to talk to the 2, maybe 3 that can bring value to what we do, not the 2 or 3 plus 3 that are fun people, because we just don't have the time. So we want to be in that camp of, and that's still with us today, of I want to bring value to you, not just be the relationship driven, which is still important, but smoother type. We just don't have time for that anymore, right?
Correct. Correct. I agree. So now all of us in sales deal with objections, and it is
Yeah.
a very difficult one. So whether that be from the decision maker or others involved in the decision making process, and the today things are a lot more collaborative. People, it's not just one or two people that are making the decision. It's always, hey, let me run it by my team. Let me run it by this person. And it seems to be that there's always gonna be somebody within the arena that's going to, raise their hand, right? And so how do you handle those objections? Specifically, you use a term called, another one I got from your training, drop the rope. So tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that, the drop the rope as it pertains to objections.
Yeah. So it's a very good question. One of the things that's when we're together with teams is there's a lot of what we do sticks throughout, not just what we do in the room for the 2 or 3 days we're together, but the way we use it when we're in the field talking to customers and the way we deal with others in our personal, even our work life. And one of the things that I alluded to earlier is we want to relieve tension, and tension's invariably going to be there in some sales conversation, and it could be simply put on price. I want to pay this, but you're charging this, and there's a gap there. And so relieving tension is to have the courage and the strength to say, hey, we may not be a good fit yet. I still have something to learn, and that's a little bit of a pressure release, so we don't shut down. And it works in objection. So if you were to handling as well, if you were to take a very specific objection, your price is too high. When I ask salespeople, what is your next move? Invariably, I'll hear two or three things. Compared to what, right? What's your number? By how much? And other things that still have price or comparison in that equation. So the first thing that we do, and we work through this and we practice this with teams, is we say, you accept and acknowledge what's being said to you. It doesn't mean you agree you're a high price provider, but what you say is, you're right. We are not the least expensive.
Mm,
There are others who may sell or do sell what we do on an individual basis for less. And
mhm.
here, and I don't want to get into a workshop now, you just pause, zip it up for a minute. And everybody talks about awkward silence, but usually the person who will talk next will be the person on the other end of the line or sending across the table from you. And it might be an and or a but, that's fine. But if they don't, and you would say this, you relieve the tension and say either one of two things. And I wouldn't want you to overpay. I know how tight budgets are. I get the constraints that you have this quarter, this month, this year. All of that releases tension. And by that, we call that dropping the rope. But you could take
Right.
an even stronger approach and say, you're right. We are not the least expensive. Pause. And that's why we may not be a fit for everybody, or we are not a fit for everybody. Now, before everybody panics, yes, it's hard to swallow. You're not giving up. You're not telling them to go get it from somebody else. What you're doing is you're reframing the conversation. I get, you see that. You're right. We're not for everybody because we don't have products that cost nearly nothing or are high quality or et cetera. And it's after that you can get into clarifying questions. So yeah, Brian, you're right. There are others who do what we do that sell it for less. It's
Mhm.
because of that we may not be a good fit for everybody. Now you're thinking, well, I still want to be a good fit. And then I'll say, but can I ask you a couple of questions? And now we're in the clarifying questions. And now back to whoever may have said compared to what, you want to say that. Let's make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Let's make sure that what I learned in discovery is still relevant because, and then we would respond, of course, we're a little bit higher, but when you look at some of the requirements you had and the way that we think that we can help you achieve, we are likely going to be the least expensive partner you have in this space or this provider of. So we're reframing it and reshifting it. Now, one pause here. I no way ever say that that's 10 for 10, that this, takes your batting average from wherever you are to 100%. That's not possible, but it does improve your average. And in many selling organizations, if you can move from 2, 3, or 4 to 4, 5, or 6, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of
It
upside.
totally It totally is, and you're right, you're not gonna be 100% every single time, but to go from 0 or 1 to a 4 or 5, it like you said, is amazing. So
Hmm.
so it's definitely something that to overcome to be able to provide that value to your clients. So I would like to pivot a
Hmm.
little bit here and talk about engagement. So, I'm a firm believer that engagement is the hardest thing that we deal in sales. You have multiple people involved in decision making. That's if you get anybody on the phone these days or on
Right,
email.
right.
And they all have meetings, they're covering for someone on PTO, they're taking PTO, they're working on other projects, even leaving the company. The turnover in supply chain right now is just crazy. How do you keep these people engaged? I think you have a term called check your six. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So check your six is a framework for when you're exiting your recommendation. It's a check in. Hey, did that cover what you wanted to hear? Do you believe that there's a fit? Is there anything we missed? You seem to be hesitating. Can I ask why? But it's also a little bit relevant for what you're saying around engagement. I think the way to think about engagement is, let's give it a couple of blocks here. The first is early engagement, right? Like you just said, I'm trying to reach out to a customer who's in my space, who does not work with me, and it's very hard to find, even if I know who that is, to get to get something back that's other than being ghosted, right? So whether I send
Right.
an email, whether I leave a voicemail, whether or not I send a LinkedIn request, even God forbid they pick up the phone, they seem like they want to get off as fast as they can. So what am I saying? And what do I say? So one thing we want to remember early on, the reason why most of us fail in sales and early engagement is because we lead with our solution. So many salespeople will say, "Hi, my name is I work for. We're really good at. I noticed that you're in this field, and I'd love to have a conversation, see if there's any opportunity." Well, that smells of a sales call right there. And the reason that we get ghosted is not all entirely our customer's fault. In other words, they're not simply ignoring us. We are every day, you and I and anybody who's in business is looking for those easy delete buttons. Like, which ones can I move to the left off my phone, which I don't have to worry about today? I know I have some lukewarm ones and then I got some hot ones, and our customers are no different. So if we send an email, my name is I work for, that's the easy delete button for them. So that does apply even as you get into the sales process, and also more people. If a new player emerges or another person on a team emerges, it applies a couple of ways. One, we want to bring them into this decision process with the same way, not I work for, but I'm working to solve or helping Brian to achieve, and I'd love you to join us, or he suggested I reach out. That's a different communication than I too want to make sure I cross my T with you so I can make a sale, right?
Hmm.
There's that. And then there's the ask. It's being curious. So there's a little bit tied to discovery, which is simply, and I don't want to make it sound too easy, but it's simply who else is involved? When should they be involved? What would their role in the decision process be? Should they be brought in now? Should I follow up with them? In fact, one thing I specifically do, people are looking for a very specific thing I do that they can use. When somebody else says somebody else will be involved in the decision-making process, we typically say, well, good, should we all meet? Well, I don't know. It's always tough to get us together. I say, I'll tell you what, if you'll introduce me to them or just let me have I will book a meeting with them. And then I'll come back to you and bring us together or fill you in on what I heard. I don't wait, because if you wait for the three of you or the four of you, it's going to be weeks and months before that happens. So by asking those questions, you find out the players earlier and you have a better chance of getting them involved earlier. A lot of sales are missed because we didn't ask and we
Hmm.
don't know. And I believe, I have no science or anything to back this up, but my own experience, I believe sometimes we feel if I don't ask, it isn't there. and, and it is. And it's better to ask who else is involved and hear a name you did not have any idea existed and get on the business of getting them involved than to not hear the name when they are involved. That's what happens.
Interesting. Okay. So, over the last 10 years, what things have changed with regard to buyers in the B2B space? So, a lot of things from what I'm seeing every day have changed. So, I'd be curious to see what you're seeing on the B2B side.
Yeah, you hit one. I think one is, and of course, within in what we do, we call it unreceptiveness, but busy. There's a lot of noise, right? We had events and we have things and we have tools, right? The event was COVID. So that took everybody from one way of doing business to another way of doing business. And just to reiterate what I said, and I heard these from B2B customers, we used to talk to 6 providers. We're now down to 2 or 3 because we simply don't have time. We don't want to waste space. So you better be one of those good 2 or 3, or you're not going to be on the list to even have a chance to work with us. And they weren't maybe that specific, but that's what they meant. So that's an event. The other thing is technology, right? I mean, so we've been in the technology of CRM and Google for some time, but look where it's shifting to now. It's AI. It's like getting a new computer, right? AI is all about the how, which is the software, which is the prompt. It's all about
Right.
what do I do with the answer? And then importantly, what guardrails do I need to put up so I don't embarrass myself to the customer or inadvertently share a price sheet out in space, or AI is not perfect. In fact, it outright can lie to you or BS with you. So you just got to have guardrails when you're up there before you start using it to help with emails and all that other stuff. So it creates a lot of noise. So what I like to tell the salespeople is, yeah, all of that's changed and is changing or has been a part of the change. So what do we do about it? We focus on driving receptivity. We slow it down. We ask good questions. And of course, you need to adapt to the technology, right? If you're not using CRM to keep you organized in your business, no matter what one it is, which one it is, you're going to fall behind. You'll miss something. If you're not doing at least some learning on your own about what AI is and isn't and what I should be doing, but double check it and edit it, you're going to fall behind. So we need the technology, but we also need to be able to still maintain that relationship, find that relationship, cultivate that relationship, and bring that relationship home in the form of a sale. And what I said last is that's kind of why I like to smile and say, I'm not sure AI will ever take that over, because I'm not sure AI can be that kind of relationship driven. It can be tool driven, but somebody still
Mhm.
needs to say, Brian, I got an idea on a way we can help. And here's what it is. And here's how I contrast it with other options you have. Until a robot can do that, we're always going to have a job.
Well, correct. Robots cannot be empathetic either.
That's right.
So
That's right.
so that's a big thing. As far as AI is concerned, how and you kind of touched on this already, but let's
Yeah.
just dive into it a little bit more. How do you see AI impacting the sales industry over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think like anything, it'll be a tool for productivity. So for some that are very prospecting oriented, like cold and heavy and often, there's obviously there's AI tools and things already written that can go out and find customers that fit a certain profile from a prompt you have written, and prompts get better the more you write them and the more you ask them and the more practice you have with them. It can also do something that's a little bit of a misunderstood, but very, very important. You know, people will say, well, this is going to save you 4 hours of time. And I'll give you the example here now. And you got to be careful. What I'm about to talk about doesn't mean it saves you 4 hour times. It means it saves you 4 hours if you ever would have done it. For example, if you're a large manufacturer of anything, but one of your customers is Caterpillar, and you want to get higher in the organization and you're going to meet with somebody potentially in the C-suite, and you need to understand a couple of things from their 10K, anything their CEO might have said about your product and some relevance, you would have had to Google it, download the 10K, read it, study it, go to the library, figure it out, make notes in the margin, might have cost you 4 hours. Now with AI, you can ask prompts that say, tell me about a time when that reference in their 10K that, and it's going to go and find you that probably 10 minutes or less. Okay. But very, very important. That doesn't mean you were doing it. Now it's saving you time, because a lot of us in sales said, that's a good idea, but I'm not going to go peruse through the annual report for 4 hours. Right. But now in a way you can get highlights. So it's, if you know how to use these tools and use and edit the tools, put the guardrails up, will be helpful. Right. Because
Mhm.
you'll find that speaker who said, or you'll find that connection to your product, or you'll find something interesting about their earnings that you might be able to avoid or impact. So that's how that's where it's moving to, and that's what we need to be aware of. So by role, it will change. I mean, if I were I think we can all say this, a customer service, or just somebody calls in and needs to be moved to the right place at the right time, and a little bit about the products, that's going to be that can be very AI driven. What can I help you with? Where do you need to go next? But when you talk about complex selling, complex sales, and complex people, we can use it as a tool to speed up what we want to do. But we got to be careful and put the guardrails on.
Great points, great points. So, last question. What is next for you as you move along in your career? Because you've done a lot. I mean, just across when looking at your LinkedIn, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So,
Yeah.
what's next for you?
So a couple of things that I'm working on. One is more of the same. I love doing what I'm doing, and I always say to people who ask, as long as people are willing to listen to what I have to say about improving your sales skills, I'd be willing to help you and talk with you about that. So I'm going to continue to do that. The other things that I'm going to get a little bit more involved on is organizations. I'm going to get on organizations boards that really want to kind of look under the hood intentionally and seriously and with purpose of their sales team. Are we doing the right things? Is this going to mean a difference? Is this the tools that we should be using? Are we investing in our people in the right way? You know, having created boards, certainly as a CEO, everybody has a certain discipline, and I think I can bring a lot of that to boards. The other thing that's starting to happen a lot too, especially this time of year, is 1 or 2 hour opportunities I have with teams at sales kickoffs or people who want to hear the receptivity story. And I really enjoy that. A lot of times they turn into future engagement or future work. So that's always good. But I love being able to share ways that we can communicate better. And you heard me say this very early on, with an audience than we have in the past. Now, admittedly, I
Mhm.
work with salespeople, so our audience is sales, but we all have multiple audience. We have a boss, we have a team, we have partners, spouses, we have families, friends, groups, sports groups we may be ahead of or teaching. And the art of getting that movement is to really influence over the decision. And the only way you can influence is to be a good communicator. and communication is all driven by receptivity. So boards, speaking, doing a lot of the same. That's it. Unless somebody comes in and says, John, I need you to run, manage, and lead my team. I might look at it because I do get this question. Do you ever miss doing that? I would be lying if I said no, but I have a lot of teams that I get to be in front of. So that's what I really lean into now.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like you got a plan. So that's great. Good to see. So thank you so much for being on. Audience, this is John Ferguson. He's with Aslan Sales Training. You can find him on LinkedIn. I will tell you that having taken his course before, it's amazing as far as being able to take a different approach to sales, because sales is all really about being different. And John brings that to the table every time. So, John, thanks again for being on the Simply Sell podcast. You've been a great host, or great guest, and look forward to having you on again sometime.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.